LLM as judge and LLM as Shakespeare, right? It's kind of like those are the two bits that are really good. And then your business logic, the sequences of things to do, when to do it, what type of business rule to activate is in the workflow.
I think the main word we probably use when making this chatbot is nuance. And I feel like we've always come back to like, well, there's a lot of nuance, and a really interesting exercise trying to program around that and prompt around that.
I hope you can see now, this is very high level, like how we could use what the LM is good at, which is like taking unstructured data, sorry, and producing structured data for inputs into a classical workflow engine, right? And then take the outputs of that and give it back to the LLM, which is really good also at making up things, right? So composing messages. So that way we use the right tool for the right phase to get the right business outcome.
Welcome back to another episode of the Code Cognition podcast. Today I have 3 software engineers sitting with me who have been day in and day out working on agentic systems, both on LLM workloads and workflows, as well as agents themselves. And today we're going to be talking about specifically deterministic workflows and how to refine a workflow utilizing an LLM. And Scott, Daniel, Aaron, thanks so much for being here.
I'm Scott, and I'm the founder and one of the principal engineers at Olio Apps.
I'm Aaron. I am a principal engineer and the architect of the project we're going to discuss at Olio Apps.
My name is Daniel. I've been a software developer. I've been with Olio as a software engineer for a few years now and working on this project since it came to Olio.
Fantastic. Again, thank you all so much for taking the time to chat about this today. Now, I'm going to want to start first about the architecture of the system that you have built and what's making it deterministic. However, something we were just discussing was a little bit this idea that the language and the terminology of LLM development, agentic AI development, is not just evolving, but also solidifying. It's a very specific terminology. And this is, I think, a great thing because it means we can be consistent in what we're talking about. Training means something very specific when it comes to an LLM. And it means something very different when I'm at the gym and I'm training. So we want to make sure that we align ourselves properly. So I don't know if there's any terms that you're thinking that you're going to be using a lot, and make sure people who are listening that are very new, just they immediately can get caught up to speed.
Yeah, I mean, we've been calling it a deterministic chatbot, but maybe Scott, there you've heard other terminology that published by Anthropic that can describe it a little bit more recognizably.
Yeah, in the paper, Building Effective Agents by Anthropic, they kind of distinguish between workflows, which are kind of deterministic workflows where you farm out part of the logic to an LLM, and agents, which is more like where you give it a prompt and you give it some tools, and then the LLM or the agent is kind of self-determining what it's going to do. So workflows versus agents.
So I guess our project would be more accurately described as a workflow powered by an LLM, right? To do the various aspects of it.
Yes.
Deterministic chatbot is how I call it, but actually it maps nicely to that, the way they describe it at Anthropic.
Yeah, it's like a deterministic chatbot workflow engine.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for teaching everyone, especially even me, something new today. So this is quite great. Now, maybe let's have like one more like foundational or remedial question, which is like for someone who's very, very new, like why do we even need workflows? Potentially, maybe we were all given this idea, or some companies were given an idea that you can just have user sends a request to your open AI endpoint for ChatGPT and get a response, and hey, we can put this into production and everything will be fine. Why doesn't something like that work? Or what have we learned from trying that over the past several years? We being the marketplace rather than us, but the world, what has the world learned?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you need a workflow to create a business outcome that is desirable, right? And usually that's not just by asking one question and getting something back. That's actually, as part of your business, you have very specific sets of steps or communication pathways or even effects that happen as a result of responses from whoever you're trying to get the outcome from. So it's often a business specific secret sauce, right? That you need to then automate in order to get the outcome from it. So yeah, so and we've had workflows for automating outcomes forever. It's just that how do you inject an LLM into right places in that workflow, and it's where it's appropriate and where it's not appropriate is actually what we're discussing here. And yeah, and if you do that incorrectly, right, or less skillfully, then your business outcome is not as likely to succeed. So that's what we've learned specifically. What do you guys think? Yeah.
Also, I think if you have a strict process, business rules that you need to follow, for example, if you have something that needs to occur over multiple days and this thing needs to occur on this day and this thing needs to occur on that day, that's a good example of where you might want, more of a deterministic workflow versus, you need these things to happen, versus you're going to just let an LM decide what to do when.
Right. What to do, when to do it, and how to do it. Just describing that in a giant essay to an LLM is less effective than you'd like,
And
and
maybe less reliable.
less reliable. Yes, over all the very many different scenarios that can happen, it may deviate from your curated set of steps and sequences of things to do that should produce the desired business outcome. It could very well do that, and actually, the larger the thing that you send it, the less awesome it gets. We found that out. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say it's also, just to add on, it's kind of the same thing with a human. If you give a human 40 or 50 pages of business rules and tell them, go figure out how to respond to this, it's going to be very difficult for a human to go dive in and do that. It's the same thing for an LLM. So yeah, compacting what we actually send to it is more accurate.
Yes, and in fact, it's probably better to have 3 or 4 humans doing separate tasks and having something coordinating what they do, right? And when they do it versus just one person doing everything, like you said.
Excellent. So one thing I'm hearing kind of in summary is that if there's specific rules or guidelines around what, when, and how a process needs to be done, then the LLM can benefit from some structure regarding that. And to the degree that many individuals, like there's maybe a lot of listeners have some experience of querying LLMs or using them personally, but it's different when you move out of this world of like entertainment or one-off projects to needing or like a repeatable business outcome. And if you're looking for a repeatable business outcome, congratulations, you've graduated to the world of workflows and needing a workflow developed for your LLM.
Yep. That's a fair assessment, yeah.
Yeah, you're moving out of the world of chatting and just like talking to an LLM, and like you need every day your business needs to wake up and do this thing at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. and then after this is done, do that thing. So that's where workflows are handy.
1,000,000%. So where do these workflows particularly live, or how do they interface with the chatbot itself?
I guess in context of the entire architecture.
Yes, in the context of the architecture.
Yeah. So the project we were working with was basically a patient outreach project. I'm not gonna to protect my customers' privacy. I'll just describe it as like a dental clinic, for example, right? So in this project, a patient would leave the clinic, and the outcome is that we want to get information back from that patient to figure out if they had a good time at the clinic, or at least did not have a terrible time in the clinic. And that's we need to understand how well their experience went. So like that's the outcome. To get that automatically, they wanted to use messaging composed by the bot sent out to the patient, right? So when we actually, the types of messages we send to the patient varied from varied in terms of like the time we would send it. It happens in sequences, right? Maybe the initial message and then a follow-up, right? The bot would send different messages based on where they are in the message sequence, right? In terms of the initial response, initial reach out, and then the follow-ups and all that stuff. So that's that's a that's a just a classical business problem, right? It's a workflow issue. We need to know how long it was since we reached out. There's no LLM in the mixture deciding. The workflow is time based. However, what we do when the patient responds is now we're starting to mix the LLM with classical workflow things, right? So when the patient responds to the initial reach out, we will use the LLM to analyze structured data and features from the response in the first phase. Then based on the content, that structured data, we would feed it to a classical algorithm, which determines what is the nature or the style of the response we're going to compose, and then maybe decorate that initial structured data with additional structured data from the database, right? So now what we have is we have coded structured data derived by the LLM given to a classical workflow function, right? Which then says you need to create a message or this type of response. Then we turn around and give that to the LLM in a third phase that says this looks like the structured data says the patient is not very happy, right? And you need to send a I'm sorry type message. Then we can use the LLM to compose a message that matches their tone, but maybe uses a template, right? Provided to it by the rest of the system in order to, reply in a business relevant and standardized way. So like it'd be the composer would use improvised composed messaging and marry it with a template and send it out. You may need that for compliance, for example. You have to say certain things, right? So I hope you can see now, this is very high level, like how we could use what the LM is good at, which is like taking unstructured data, sorry, and producing structured data for inputs into a classical workflow engine, right? And then take the outputs of that and give it back to the LLM, which is really good also at making up things, right? So composing messages. So that way we use the right tool for the right phase to get the right business outcome.
Yeah, I think hopefully this illustrates where like a workflow or deterministic logic is helpful in kind of coordinating calls to an LLM to like, farm out the judgment of like what kind of message this is. And then and then take that back, okay, this is a complaint, or no, this is like something else. And then farm out the composing of the response to an LLM again using like this template plus this person's information, make something natural sounding.
So I love that. It's really LLM as judge and LLM as Shakespeare, right? It's kind of like those are the two bits that are really good. And then your business logic, the sequences of things to do, when to do it, what type of business rule to activate is in the workflow, right? So exactly.
That's the promise, right? Being able to have your LLM be Shakespeare or highly sophisticated as a judge. That's great. One thing that is very evident from what you're saying is that there isn't just some magic button you can press and say, now we have a deterministic workflow with my LLM inside my business use case. It requires this it's very contextual to the process that you're using. In this client-facing example, there's a lot of additional context around the sentiment of the potential customer or client, where they sit in relation to the business. First time returning, maybe they haven't chatted in a while. Is it urgent? Are they in an urgent situation? For, in the dental situation, it's like, oh no, my root canal went bad, or I'm a new patient. And being able to artfully understand which parts of those interactions, which the business already knows about, and to feed that into the LLM as this structured knowledge, take some real engineering. And I know, and take some real engineering, which I'm excited to get a little bit deeper into in terms of how to be talking about it. But I think it's evident based off of what you were just saying, Aaron, too, about utilizing conventional algorithms and using the structured data from these interactions and feeding it back into the chatbot, and how you also summarize Scott. So this is good. Good, I think, for everyone to hear that it requires some sophistication. It's not just out of the box, and that's okay.
And I'd like to add that what you really can't do before having that system in production and having all the production data is to hope to train all this business logic, have the LLM like derive all the nuanced business logic from millions of data points, right? Which you don't have in the beginning. So you can't just like pour a bunch of messages and hope that the LM will figure out, well, given this thing, and you have to do this thing next, right? So yeah, it requires an engineering effort.
In last high level question, kind of on the architecture of the workflow, is that
Mhm.
how mature of a perspective of it? This is how I'm phrasing it, because I think I have my own biased opinion on the answer. So this is how I'm phrasing it. But how mature do you think the perspective is to, like, maybe hoping or having an idea, or you can just make a variety of queries to the LLM directly and just have it spit out the exact answer that you're wanting, or being able to really train something that's so perfected based off of your use case data? Do you see any problems with that idea or approach?
Well, the problem is if you're dealing with like humans and what they say, right? The complexity and nuance in the human in English language. I mean, humans will get confused reading in between the lines and what's said and what is not said, and how you say it, and not to mention all the various random idiosyncrasies everybody has when you're communicating about something important, like their experience in the dental office. I would say it would be very difficult to get a deterministic answer all the time, right? Like determining what to do in every given situation and how to respond. Also, like the actual composed message, it'd be very difficult to get something that will be the same all the time for all the different varieties of ways human beings can say it. I don't know, what do you guys agree or disagree?
I absolutely agree. I mean, there's like 1,000 different ways you can say a single sentence, and so like it's impossible to prompt for all that. Yeah, so I completely agree. It's just I think the main word we probably use when making this chatbot is nuance, and I feel like we've always come back to like, well, there's a lot of nuance. It's been a really interesting exercise trying to program around that and prompt around that.
And I later, if you want, I'll like show you examples of like why the English language makes it kind of difficult. You know,
Thanks for listening to Code Cognition. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone else who's also building the future of software. We'll see you next time.